In the middle of a busy supermarket, a little girl made a subtle, almost invisible gesture that no one seemed to notice, except for one cop. What seemed like an ordinary day turned into something far more dangerous. What he did next would change everything for her and for him. The supermarket was alive with the usual midday hustle. Shoppers meandered through the aisles, carts clattering against the floor as they picked out cereal boxes, milk, and snacks. The smell of fresh produce lingered in the air, mingling with the faint scent of baked goods. It was a place where nothing ever seemed out of the ordinary, at least not to most people. A little girl, no older than 6, walked beside her father, clutching his hand tightly. Her pink dress swished as she moved, but there was something in her eyes that didn't belong. While other children laughed and played, she seemed out of place, her gaze constantly shifting, scanning the store with a subtle nervousness. Her father, in contrast, appeared calm and unbothered. He reached for a box of cereal without a second thought, casually glancing at the shelves. But the girl? She couldn't seem to shake the feeling that something was wrong, something that had been brewing beneath the surface for some time. As the father picked up another box from the shelf, the little girl's eyes darted around the store once again. She looked around, her gaze landing on the security officers standing by the aisles near the checkout. For a split second, their eyes locked. The officer, tall and vigilant, seemed to be minding his own business, but something in the girl's expression caught his attention. Then, she did something subtle, something almost imperceptible. She raised her hand. At first glance, it appeared like a normal gesture, just a child fidgeting or reaching for something. But the officer knew better. Her fingers were held out just enough to make it clear. This wasn't a casual motion. It was a signal. Her palm was open, fingers spread wide, just slightly raised above her head. A quiet, silent plea for help, disguised as something ordinary. The officer's training kicked in instantly. His heart rate quickened, and his instincts told him to watch. This wasn't just a child playing or making random gestures. There was something more to it. The father, oblivious to the silent communication taking place, continued shopping. But the officer knew he couldn't ignore it. Something was terribly wrong, and it was up to him to figure out what. Officer Daniels watched the girl's hand drop slowly, as if she were trying to make it look like nothing had happened. But for him, the gesture was clear. He stood frozen. For a moment, his instincts kicking into high gear. Was she asking for help? Or was he misinterpreting something as simple as a child's curiosity? He glanced at the father, who was casually picking out groceries, seemingly unaware of anything out of the ordinary. The man didn't appear suspicious at first glance, but Daniels had been trained to notice things others wouldn't. Small, subtle cues. The girl's behavior didn't match the normal carefree nature of most children in the store. Daniels took a deep breath, scanning the scene. The aisles were crowded, and he knew he couldn't make any rash moves. He had to be careful, especially in a public place like this. But there was something about the girl's demeanor, the way she looked back at him, that made him trust his gut. He subtly began walking in their direction, making sure to keep his movements calm and casual. His hand hovered near his radio, ready to call for backup if needed. As he moved closer, he noticed the girl's unease deepening. Her hand was still gripping her father's tightly, but her other hand kept twitching, as if she wanted to say something but was too afraid. This was no coincidence. He needed to follow them. Daniels moved quietly through the aisles, keeping a few steps behind the father and daughter, trying to stay as inconspicuous as possible. His gaze flicked between them, noticing how the girl's head kept turning toward him. She didn't look back at her father, but every time she glanced in his direction, her eyes locked on Daniels, as if silently pleading for help. Her hand remained tightly clutched in her father's, but she seemed to be growing more agitated by the second. The father, unaware of the officer's presence, continued to shop as though everything was perfectly normal. He reached for cans of soup, seemingly lost in the task at hand. But Daniels noticed something else, the subtle way the father kept looking over his shoulder, almost like he was scanning the crowd. His movements were jerky, unnatural, and his gaze darted suspiciously toward any nearby customer or worker. It was as if he feared someone might be watching, and that made Daniel's unease grow even more. As the pair moved further down the aisle, the girl's body language became even more obvious. She stood rigid, her face tight with anxiety. Every time her father wasn't looking, Her fingers twitched, almost as if she were trying to give some kind of signal again. Her eyes flickered toward Daniels, pleading without a single word spoken. The officer's heartbeat quickened. He had seen enough to know something wasn't right, but he needed more. He had to make sure before intervening. What if it was a misunderstanding? He couldn't risk blowing his cover. But his gut told him that time was running out. The girl's distress was mounting, and he knew he couldn't wait much longer. As the father reached for a carton of eggs, Daniels saw the perfect opportunity. The girl had moved slightly ahead of him, glancing nervously back at her father. Her small hands wrung together, her body rigid with anxiety. That was it. The officer couldn't wait any longer. He approached quietly, his footsteps measured and calm. His heart pounded in his chest as he reached the girl, crouching down so he was at her eye level. He gave her a small, reassuring smile, hoping she'd know that help had arrived. "Hey there," he said gently, his voice soft but firm. "Are you okay?" The girl froze for a moment, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and hope. For a brief moment, she said nothing, just staring at him as if unsure if she could trust him. Daniels held her gaze, his expression calm but serious. He didn't want to scare her. He just needed her to know she was safe. Her lips quivered, and then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. It was a small movement, barely noticeable, but to Daniels, it was everything. He could see the tension melt from her shoulders. She was letting him in. "Can you follow me?" he asked, keeping his voice steady. "I'm here to help you." Without waiting for a response, Daniels subtly signaled to his partner, Officer Harris, who had been monitoring from a distance. Harris immediately began moving in their direction. The girl took a tentative step toward him, and Daniels's heart surged with relief. This was it. The rescue had begun. As Officer Daniels gently took the girl by the hand, she seemed to exhale for the first time since he had approached her. Her small fingers gripped his tightly, and though she was still trembling, there was a sense of relief in her body. She looked up at him with wide, trusting eyes, no longer glancing anxiously over her shoulder at her father. The weight of fear that had been in her posture began to fade. Officer Harris quickly moved in, his presence steady as he addressed the father, who had yet to notice the shift in the situation. "Sir," Harris said, his tone calm but firm, "you need to come with us." The father's face faltered for a split second before he recovered. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice tight with frustration. "What's the problem?" "You're under arrest for suspicion of child endangerment," Harris replied, moving to detain him. The father's protests were muted as Daniels and Harris moved swiftly, ensuring the girl stayed out of the fray. As the father was led away, Daniels knelt down next to the girl, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "You're safe now," he said softly, giving her a reassuring smile. The girl nodded, her body finally relaxing as she understood. The danger was over, and for the first time that day, she felt safe. As the squad car pulled away, the supermarket once again returned to its hum of normality, shoppers casually filling their carts, unaware of the small but significant rescue that had just unfolded. Officer Daniels stood outside, watching the patrol car disappear into the distance. His hand lingered on the door of his car, a quiet reflection settling over him. Sometimes, it's the smallest signals that save lives. The girl's subtle plea, the officer's quick thinking, it all came together in a moment of courage. "Sometimes, you just have to act," Daniels whispered, watching the bustling crowd. "It's never too late to make a difference."